Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Esteemed professors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, a very good morning. It gives me a great honor and pleasure to welcome you to this symposium entitled The Translation Movement Between East and West, with a special focus on the late translation movement. As you know, we met exactly 2 years ago at this very hall to discuss the same topic, and then we sort of promised each other that we have to revisit this topic due to its importance, and especially due to the fact that in the first symposium we managed to cover quite a lot in terms of the so-called first translation movement and the second translation movement. But the third translation movement, or the late translation movement, the so-called in the pre-modern and the early modern era, we sort of didn't have enough time and enough resources and the scholars to cover. And here we are today. We are covering, revisiting again this topic. We are revisiting the first translation movement with some new aspects that we couldn't cover the first time. We are doing the same for the second one, but ultimately the focus will be on the late translation movement. There's no doubt it's such an important topic, dealing with the cultural fusion between East and West in general, and shedding light into the history of science and the movement of thoughts and ideas between the so-called East and West that we are used to use nowadays. We are very lucky to have an array of distinguished scholars and researchers from different corners of the world. I do thank them, each of them personally, for taking the hassle and taking these long journeys, and most welcome in London. We look forward to your contributions throughout the day, today and tomorrow as well. It is sad that we are missing today two distinguished professors, Professor Ekmeleddin Sanaullah and Professor Kim Plofka. Due to objective reasons, they couldn't make it. But hopefully Professor Sanaullah might join us later on online. Professor Kim, she wouldn't be able to make it, so therefore the first session will be somewhat a bit shorter, but usual time, because we are starting a bit late anyway. So most welcome again to this symposium today. We look forward to a fruitful discussion. And without further ado, before we start with the sessions, as you know, we have got 5 discussion sessions. It's my honor and pleasure to invite our chairman, Mr. Sharaf Ahmed Zaki Yamani, to welcome you and say a few words. Please, Sharaf.
Thank you, Sali. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Distinguished scholars, esteemed guests, friends and colleagues, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the Al-Furqan Islamic Heritage Foundation and to this very important gathering, a second edition of a symposium titled The Translation Movement Between East and West. Few subjects capture our shared intellectual history more powerfully than the translation movement. The story of people who carried ideas across languages and generations, allowing knowledge to grow and civilizations to prosper. And this year, as Sali mentioned, we are honored to be joined by distinguished scholars from all over the world, from Turkey, from Iran, from India, from the Middle East, from Europe, and the United States. And I thank you all for participating and sharing your lifelong work and knowledge with us. Your presence reflects something deeply meaningful, the story of translation and the movement of ideas across civilization is at its heart a story of one shared human civilization, where ideas have continuously flowed and evolved and shaped the way we view the world. It is a story that belongs to all of us, and one that began when translation became the language of discovery, If we look back across the centuries, we can trace how ideas moved through what was in truth one vast interconnected world, from Greece, from China, from India, from Persia into the Arab Islamic world, and then later from the Arabic world into the European languages and Latin, and then back again. Ideas moved like caravans across languages and cultures, carrying more than words, carrying meaning, carrying interpretation, and a new way of viewing the world. In centers of excellence and knowledge like Baghdad, Damascus, and Qurtuba, scholars like Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd, Ibn al-Arabi took what they've inherited and made it their own by questioning, by refining and expanding upon the works of the Greek masters and others. Through their commentaries and scholarly work, knowledge did not merely survive, it evolved, taking on new forms and meaning and giving rise to what we now call the Golden Age of Islam, and an era that advanced science, philosophy, and art and illuminated the world for centuries later. That current of thought flowed naturally into Europe, and that inheritance helped spark the European Renaissance and later on the scientific revolution. And centuries later, that exchange of knowledge continued, this time moving back into the Islamic world, mainly under the patronage of the Ottoman Empire. It is really a remarkable story, one that reminds us that progress has always come from within this shared human continuum. And that is what we will be doing today and tomorrow, continuing that journey together. Our speakers will take us across centuries and regions, exploring how translation became the glue and the meeting point of civilizations, and how it continues to affect and shape the knowledge and understanding today. We are all eager to listen and to learn from what will be shared. But personally also, I'm extremely proud of the works of many foundations and institutions, and proud of the work that my father had started, God rest his soul. And Al-Furqan continues for 38 years, upholding this very tradition, the dialogue of knowledge and ideas between the East and the West. From our offices in London, in Jeddah, in Cairo, we span continents, supporting research projects, publishing works and critical editions of older scholars, cataloging and preserving manuscripts all over the world. Through these efforts and others, we provide scholars and researchers around the world with the necessary tool to understand our shared intellectual human heritage more deeply, not only to uncover the past, but also to shape a wiser understanding of our future. I believe this is the living spirit of the translation movement, connecting people, connecting ideas, and time. That same exchange of ideas and knowledge continues to inspire our work here, reminding us that the bridges once built through the translation are still needed in our fragmented world, and also that the pursuit of knowledge should always remain a shared human journey. Perhaps the deeper lesson of the translation movement is that East and West was never truly separate, but two expressions of one continuous human civilization, learning from within itself in different languages and at different times. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for being here with us and for sharing your time, knowledge, and insights. I would also like to thank the dedicated team at Al-Furqan and everyone who helped make this gathering possible. We are truly delighted to have you all with us, and I wish you all an insightful and inspiring symposium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sharaf. After these splendid words, I won't take much of your time. It is time to delve into the actual sessions. As I mentioned, we have got 5 sessions. The first one, we are missing one of the speakers, but yet we are still on time, I guess. It is a great honor and pleasure for me to invite Professor Charles Burnett, a well-known professor. Doesn't need much of introduction. He's an old friend of Al-Furqan. Last symposium he was one of the speakers, and this time he's honoring us with chairing the first session of this symposia. So please, Professor Charles, take your seat. Obviously start the session first, and then I leave it to him to invite the rest of the speakers that are related to this. Thank you, and I wish you a pleasant and enjoyable and fruitful time. Please, Professor.
Thank you very much. After those wonderful introductions, I just want to repeat actually that I'm so impressed that Al-Furqan has put on these 2 conferences, one 2 years ago, one now, looking at the whole history of the transmission of learning, of the contacts between the East and West, from the Middle Ages, from the beginning of Islam, let's say, in the 7th century, through to the 19th century and beyond. This is really quite unusual and very important, because I've had 40 years experience of working in the field of Arabic, Islamic, Latin influences. And in my experience, people have either talked about the Middle Ages or they've talked about the Renaissance, maybe a little bit about the influence of literature written in English on the Arabic world, Islamic world in the 19th century, but not all together. And here we have, for the first time, if I can say that, a view and an understanding, a greater understanding of the whole history of this Arabic, Latin, Arabic, European, Western, Eastern, Western influence. And what we have in addition this time is that Western, Eastern influence. And I think it's very important to see these things, see the whole picture. And over the next 1.5 days, we will have the opportunity to do that. Having said that, I will now introduce the first speaker, who is Professor Sanaullah Nadawi from the University of Almagest. And in fact, if I can say a personal word, this is one example. For the first time, I've got to know Professor Nadawi's works, and I wish I'd known them before. But really, I mean, he's written on East-Western influence, he's written on Dante, he's written on Sufism and various aspects of Islamic culture and its impact or its relationship to Western culture. And I'm afraid I didn't know any of his books. And this meeting gives an opportunity for people who've been brought up in the Western tradition of scholarship to get to know what has been done, what has been written, what is being studied in Eastern universities, whether in India, in Oman, in Cairo, or whatever. So, without further ado, I shall invite Professor Nadawi to come to talk about the India's contribution to medieval Baghdad.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's an immense pleasure, an honor for me to be with the academia, learned academia, drawn from all over the world under the banner of Al-Furqan Foundation that has dedicated itself to the research and having certain historical dialogues, aspects of dialogues involving East and West. So it's really a pleasure for me and a great honor for which I'm indebted heavily to the Al-Furqan Foundation, represented by Sharaf Sahab. We usually call it Sahab in East, and Sali Sahab, of course, and all those behind the scenes, academic scenes of grandeur, great grandeur we have now to hold this meeting. The topic I had chosen for this point, for this occasion, is related to certain aspects of dialogue that have taken place between India's legacy and Baghdad as in the Middle Ages. So I have just confined myself to this point alongside certain aspects related to the history of this dialogue which has taken place. Because while confining to the actual aspects of dialogue, philosophical, literary, etc., that have taken place during the Middle Ages, it is assumed that the primary texts that we find, that we analyze, are related to the Sanskrit language. So my deliberation would be excluding anything that has happened later in this scenario, which are of course very significant. But for the actual contribution that was played by India, that is the Sanskrit India, I will be calling it, just as I have in some other aspect of this confined myself to Latin Europe. So it has been the Sanskrit India which has played significant role. So it was the discourse of science and philosophy and literature, which didn't have anything to do with religion as Islam. Although beside the philosophical level, it has to do significantly to the domain of Sufism, spirituality, Sufism, the Vedantic vision of life, philosophy, and spirituality, which were transmitted via translation of the Indian texts, Indian Sanskrit texts, such as Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which was translated by Abu Rayhan al-Biruni, alongside the book of Bluhar and Buzasva, which was the life of Buddha. These, and of course, the examples of Panchatantra, that is Kalila Dimna, this is very well known. So I will be also excluding this aspect because this is well known, and focusing on these two aspects alongside the aspects of science and astronomy and mathematics, which are representative of the actual dialogue that has taken place between India and medieval Baghdad. So themes I have addressed are the medieval Baghdad, the Indo-Arabic perspectives, the translations, the fables, Panchatantra, Buddha Charitra, because Bluhar and Buzasva is a translation of Buddha Charitra. In the sciences, books of Siddhanta. In medicine, books of Samhita. And here lies the difference between the domain of Siddhanta and Samhita. In Sufism, focusing on pantheism, the pantheistic perspectives, Bhuta Shuddhi and Yoga. This was, again, as I have just said at the outset, that we will be not dealing with religion as in its canonical aspects, rather spirituality, because Sufism in the history of Islam, as appeared during the Middle Ages, chiefly in Baghdad, it has to be seen in this particular historical perspective, where spirituality as such, focusing on training of mind and having an end to the oscillations of the senses and the sensory perceptions, that sort of religio-spiritual perspective, it was for the first time that we find getting introduced to the domain of thought and practice, spiritual thought and practice in the history of Islam. The Arab culture with Abbasid Baghdad was epicenter had embarked upon rendering the scientific, philosophical and literary legacy of its neighbor civilizations, Greco-Hellenistic, Syriac, Persian and Indian chiefly, into Arabic in individual as well as official practices and capacities under the banner of Abbasid Baitul Hikmah. It was here that the wisdom corpus of the schools of Nisibis and Edessa, the Academy of Jundisapur, the Library of Alexandria, the Imperial Library of Constantinople, and the academic depository of Buddhist Balakh that was transferred into Arabic. Here this last segment the academic depository of the Buddhist Balakh is significant. Why? Because when we talk about the scientific legacy of the Siddhanta and the Samhita and the literary legacies that we find in the Buddha Charitra or the fables of Alf Layla wa Layla, the fables incorporated within Alf Layla wa Layla, because what is known as Hazar Afsana is to be seen, it cannot be seen in isolation of Kalila wa Dimna and Panchatantra, because so many aspects which have been incorporated, taking into account the tales which are known as the Jatak Gatha of the Buddhist sources. So, because the Burmakites, which had played very notable role in rendering the medieval Baghdad in terms of philosophy, sciences and literature, the Burmakite Chamberlains, according to historians, they are the Parmukh. So Barmak, the word Barmak has its origin in Parmukh. Parmukh is chief in Sanskrit, and they have been identified to have originated from either from Kashmir, they were the Kashmiri Brahmins, or somewhere from Gujarat of that time. So they were the Buddhists, primarily they were the Buddhists, and the spread of, this is to be seen in the backdrop of the spread of Buddhism in Central Asia. Balakh happened to be a very famous center with lots of remaining things still present today. So, and in the advent of Islam, they accepted Islam, they were converted to Islam, and they had very significant role to play in founding the essence of Baghdad in the cosmopolitan aspect, in the aspect of the scientific enterprise, civilizational dialogue that took place between Arab Islamic perspectives, and I prefer here to use the word a fusion of Abrahamic and Brahmic perspectives. Brahmic perspectives, because Brahmism in the context of the Sanskrit legacy, while we are confining ourselves to the scientific deliberations and not to the religious deliberations, here is the buzzword in this sequence. Secondly, even if you take into account the theological aspect, so here, under the current of the Buddhist theological perspectives, containing many aspects of Vedic essence of interpretation of the individual in his relation to the ultimate, that in the final analysis doesn't have anything against, I must say, even the canonical aspects of Islam, because it is not polytheism. In the ultimate analysis, it is not the polytheism. It might be a pantheism, but this pantheism, when we say in the sequence of An al-Haqq, as propounded by Al-Hallaj, it is Upanishadic Aham Brahmasmi. Aham Brahmasmi is found in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it is over there. So here is the point I'm making and emphasizing upon. Alongside the scientific disciplines of the Samhitas and other the Shastras, which were translated into Arabic from the Sanskrit sources, of course, primarily Sanskrit sources, will be having one aspect of theological thought which is embedded in the Indian wisdom, which we find originating from the Vedas, is chiefly the Upanishads. Because if we analyze Upanishad, that is An-al-Haq, in this sequence, Aham Brahmasmi, here it is just to disassociate oneself from the canonical interpretations of the ultimate reality, rather focusing on the holistic aspects, giving leaving no room for separation of the body or the matter from the spirit. So it was that Siddhanta, which is known in the Indian philosophy as Samkhya Darshan. it was translated into Arabic thanks to Abu Rayhan al-Biruni. This Samkhya aspect, while focusing on the spiritual training aspect, that is Samkhya getting trained into spiritual interpretation of the essence. Here we find yoga. Yoga, not simply the Hatha yoga or the gymnastics, yogi gymnastics, rather different aspects of yoga which we'll be having, chiefly Laya yoga. In Laya yoga, where we find that the philosopher, the mystic philosopher, the seeker, who is known as the yogin, he treads the way on the path of Bhut Shuddhi, where he purifies his sensory organs, which is of course Tazkiyah and Tasfiyah. In the religious discourse in proper Islamic spiritual discourse, we'll be finding different aspects of Tazkiyah and Tasfiyah. But because of the yogic techniques like purification of soul, suspension of breath, for example, etc., these aspects, these techniques, we won't be finding in the canonical sources. These techniques, like special aspects of sitting, of having different postures, which has been prescribed by different spiritual silsilas, like Chishtiya silsila, Soharwardiya silsila, Qadiriya silsila, Naqshbandiya silsila, etc., alongside the concept of lataif, in which the human body is analyzed in terms of the powers of or the centers of power, starting from the head up to the last segment of human life. They are represented in the stages of a purification of soul. Notably, these stages of the purification of soul, which are known as the chakra system in Indian spiritual systems. I'm not saying the religious systems, rather the spiritual systems. We'll be finding that they are reflected in many ways by the Sufi denominations. Like these chakras were identified as lataif, al-lataif. So now notably we'll be finding that the system of lataif, alongside the ways of Bhut Shuddhi or Tazkiyah and Tasfiyah, if they find a way into the Islamic theological spiritual domain in Arabic, it was because of two primary books. The first is the Buddha Charitra, Qissato Bulohar wa Buzasf, and second is in a practical form, sort of practical manual, that is Panini's Yoga Sutra, which was translated by Abu Rayhan al-Biruni. So in this sequence we'll be finding that as regards the Sanskrit India, I won't be calling it Hindu India, just as I'm avoiding the word Muslim Baghdad or Islamic Baghdad or Christian Europe. Rather, I prefer the words like Latin Europe, Arab culture of Baghdad, or the medieval Occidental culture, as compared to or in relation to the Sanskrit India, where the focus was not on the canonicals of religion, the concept of like deities, Brahma, Vishnu, or Mahesh, or something like that. No, rather here the focus is on the Upanishadic darshan, that is represented by the famous saying Aham Brahmasmi, that is Anal Haqq, or Hamaust in the Persian manifestations. So, with the translation of Bulohar and Buzasf, which have several editions, of course, it's a well-researched document. I'm saying well-researched document because if you just look into history, we'll be finding around, I have found in one of my studies, I found around 70 Sanskrit texts, mention of which have been found in the history books. The historians who have dealt with this topic in any languages, in Arabic or in European languages or some Indian languages. But significantly, not all of these texts are present. So the books which are present and which serve as the hard material, the hard evidence that augment our interpretation, our method to approach history. That's why in these perspectives, these texts are very significant. Qissat Bulohar was Buzaf's in different, which is has different historical representations, as in East, in different languages, as well as in West. So Barlam and Josepheth in the Western counterpart, where the characters have been simply Christianized. So even in Islamic, Bulohar wa Buzaf's, aw Qissat Bulohar wa Buzaf's, the themes have been something like Islamized, or say just set into some Sufi spiritualistic tone. Sufi, because here the actual dialogue that took place was between cultures, between different communities, different regions. Notably, these regions, Baghdad as epicenter, or the Balakh before that as epicenter, this is to be seen in a historical perspective, historical, linguistic and perspective, where the things related to India and Indian culture, Indian vision that happen to be universal in nature, while interpreting the essence, interpreting the very philosophy of essence, and formulating an epistemological paradigm, how to interpret the reality. Should we interpreting the reality simply based on the reason, or simply the intuition, rather combining between the two, or it should be simply the empirical vision or the scientific vision? So this actually gives us a paradigm. I'll be calling it ontological paradigm, which is to be augmented by epistemological perspectives. So ontological domain, which is subjected to epistemological perspectives. This epistemological perspectives that does away with the duality of mind and matter, the mind-matter intrigues, where the things are seen in totality, the holistic perspective. This holistic perspective, which is represented by a fusion between East and West. In East, in the Indian culture, primarily in Indian culture, Sanskrit culture, and in West, in the schools of illumination, like Alexandrian schools of philosophy, which had, of course, offshoot in the Arab parameters, which is known as Hikmatul Ishraq, Suharwardi, and later on getting transferred to the school of Isfahan, Mullah Sadra, Mullah Hadi Sabzawari, etc. So this fusion that we will be having of East and West, Latin, Greek, Hellenistic cultures, Arabic, and of course before that the Sanskrit culture, this fusion is for all the practical purposes, I see, for all the practical purposes, rests solely on or largely on the Indian perspective. Why? Because while the translations from Indian sources are well documented, and again there is one thing, that while translating the Hellenistic legacy, there have been some historical confusions. Well, this is not in this slide, but I must I'll be mentioning it especially. While analyzing that dialogue that has taken place between East and West, focusing on the interpretation of the essence, the ontological essence, and the epistemological perspectives, we find that in the Indian context there has been no historical distortions or confusions. But in regard to the actual dialogue that has taken place between East and West, the Hellenistic West and East via Alexandria, there has been a great historical illusion. That is the ascription of Aristotle's so-called Aristotle's theology theology wrongly to Plotinus, to Plato. Well, it has been researched now, it has come to the fore that it was a historical confusion. The book was not written by Plato or Aristotle, rather it was written by Plotinus. It was Ennids. So regarding astrologia and attributing to it to Aristotle or Plato, which was a historical wrong, it was a confusion. But this confusion remained for centuries. Even with the scholars we'll be finding in India who had written on this subject, like Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, we find that in one of his writings he was unable to liberate himself from this, or to see the perspectives, right perspectives, or refute this historical illusion. That sort of illusion that we find where the innards of Plotinus are equated with astrology of Aristotle or Aflatun. That sort of confusion didn't happen in regard to the Indian text. So in this sequence, I'm emphasizing that this spiritual dialogue that we see represented by a sort of fusion between the Upanishadic culture, the Upanishadic text, as reflected in thoughts of Al-Hallaj and Al-Haq, among many others. That sort of confusion didn't happen. This is the one thing. The second thing we'll be finding in this context that when it comes to this fusion of the Sanskrit wisdom to the Arabo-Islamic wisdom, Arabo-Islamic Persian wisdom regarding pantheism, Wahdatul Wujud, the first name that comes to our mind in historical perspective is the name of Al-Bistami. So Al-Bistami is usually regarded as the founder of pantheism. Nearly in all the historical sources, some of which I have mentioned in this, in all the historical sources, we find that who was the teacher of Abu Yazid al-Bistami in regard to pantheism? So a large number of historical sources have pointed out to Abu Ali as-Sindi, Sheikh Abu Ali as-Sindi. Abu Ali as-Sindi was as Indian convert to Islam, first belonging to Hinduism, or call it the Vedic culture. First he belonged to the Vedic culture, now he belonged to, after conversion he belonged to the Muslim Arabic culture. And Abu Yazid al-Bistami himself has confessed, written, as reported by Al-Jami, that he learnt at-Tawheed, that is monotheistic, the pantheistic vision of existence, the pantheistic perspective. He had learnt it from Abu Ali as-Sindi. So apart from the text which we have seen, that is Qissat Buluhar wa Buzas and Yoga Sutra, notably when it has been shared with the learned audience, and they of course they are aware of the fact that it's not simply some gymnastics or techniques of Hatha Yoga, which is known as Hatha Yoga, which has been spread all over the world in modern times. So there was actually a sort of dialogue between the Indian wisdom and the Arabic Islamic spirituality. In one of my deliberations I have focused on this, finding the traces of or the elements of yoga, not simply the Hatha Yoga, rather the spiritual concept of yoga, between yoga and Islam in the historical as well as that is contextual and textual perspectives. Coming to the last segment of my address with the learned audience, when you combine between two cultures, when there is any attempt, serious academic attempt to address the primary notions of existence belonging to different cultures usually seen in different language, linguistic and religious perspectives. So here lies the great challenge of balancing the things, how to interpret the things. Now here practically what happens is that the good translator actually tries to harmonize the primary concerns of this discipline to the primary concerns of that disciplines, in an attempt to find a harmonious way of projecting the things. And here in the sequence, the translator sometimes avoids some specific terminologies and finds some suitable terminologies, just avoiding these terminologies which might be seen as smacking of the specific theological projections which are usually related to some polytheistic parameters. Because if someone is talking about Brahmanism, so here the polytheistic parameters would be over there. So then it will be a challenging job for Abu Rayhan al-Biruni. For example, how to translate yoga. So he won't be using the word yoga. I'll be using vritti. Like the opening sentence of Hatha Yoga is, what is yoga? Yogas chitta vriddhi nirodhe. Yogas chitta vriddhi nirodhe. Very simple, very short aphorism. Here, Al-Biruni would be translating as he replaces chitta with an-nafs. Why? Because an-nafs is a very common terminology that is found in Muslim history, in Arabic history, in the philosophical discourse. So it is nafs. So he turns the entire thing into for some reasons, of course, into what could be termed in modern parlance, as a modern perspective, as al-manzuma ruhiyya, al-nizam al-ruhi, li at-tazkiyah, tazkiyat al-nafs. So it is turned into a nafs that stands for tazkiyah. Although in actual perspectives, we'll be finding that chitta vritti nirodhe, that is something like doing away with the duality of mind and matter. Doing away with the mind and matter. This is the actual parameter of this text. But Abu Rayhan al-Biruni, because he had to reconcile this essence of spirituality with the Islamic perspective, with the Islamic system, so he uses the word an-nafs, not that is chitta, or again the word that is yoga, it's not used by him. Even the Sankhya, although he uses the word Sankhya in some isolation while interpreting the philosophy of Sankhya or Sankhya Darshan. So this way we'll be finding that it was a wise role that was played by the translator, especially when he was embarking upon having a practical balance between two systems of theology and philosophy belonging to different, at the first line, belonging to different directions. So if Islamic philosophy is to be seen in purely monotheistic perspectives, then anything that goes against it, even in some specific details, would be seen as hazardous, as just disturbing the balance. So here we find that the choice of terminologies, it reflected the very wisdom, very deep knowledge of the translator. This deep knowledge of translator in regard to Abu Rayhan al-Biruni was provided by his stay in Varanasi, where he learnt the Sanskrit language and then he translated it. This is the one thing. The second thing is this Yoga Darshan, especially in regard to, sometimes we'll be finding that this Yoga Darshan, while embarking upon the purification of soul, according to Indian philosophy that we'll be having in also in its essence in some greater parameters in Panchatantra stories that reflect the Jatak Gathas of the Buddhist nature, etc. We'll be finding that sometimes we'll be having the aspect that is related to Tantra Yoga. this Tantra Yoga, which in some cases would be seen to be reflected by sihr or some of the practices which might be very much problematic in theological perspectives. We have that there is at least one book of Indian origin, Sanskrit, that is Amrit Kund. Amrit Kund was translated into Persian as well as in Arabic. And the translator was Sheikh Muhammad Ghaus Gawaliari. And the Arabic version was prepared by him alongside Sheikh Ruknuddin as-Samarkandi, who had resided, who was the court alim or minister in the estate of Pandwa. So he had written this book. The manuscripts are found. So this aspect of the fusion related to the sihr aspect or the tantra aspect. I think the sihr aspect is not a suitable word in this perspective, although it is partly suitable. So this yogic aspect related to specific practices as we have in Tantra Yoga. It has again part of the Arab culture. I won't be saying the religious culture, rather Arab culture, because of this book, translation of this book, that is Amrit Kunda, into Arabic. So all these aspects. This was Kitab Patanjal, the manuscript of which was discovered by Louis Massignon. Hawdul Hayat. This Yog Tantra. It was translated with the title Hawdul Hayat, Amrit Kund by Ghaus Gawaliar and Ruknuddin. Alongside a large number of al Mahavakya, like Hama An al Haq, Hama Ust, Mafi Jubbati Ghairullah, etc. They are their sources in Sanskrit primarily, if the things are to be seen in historical perspectives. Now the last sentence. I'm sorry for just last sentence. How is the challenging task of the translator and after the reader who found himself amid this new discourse that tried to converse between Abrahamic faith and Brahmic denominations, Brahmic ontology and epistemology. Was he successful? Or how he escaped or eschewed the hazards? So here in my analysis, as I have highlighted this in my study, that is as a part of an encyclopedia of yoga, that is elements of yoga and Sufism, what I have found, sir, is that they have focused on certain techniques, certain philosophical vision of the purification of soul that don't go contrary to the monotheistic visions of Islam or the predominant projections. So here the focus was on the techniques, not the theological domains. And these techniques, in my analysis, I found that they were very much secular, if to use them. They were scientific, they were secular. Because purification of soul via Bhut Shuddhi or Paase Anfas, holding of breath, purification of soul, etc. These yogic techniques, they don't go contrary to canonical Islam. So they avoided any confrontation with the canonical Islam, but they contributed towards the emergence of a fusion of paramount significance that conversed between the Indian aspect, the Sanskrit aspect, and the Arabo-Islamic Persian aspect. I once again thank the Learned Academy for this invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nadawi. You have pointed out very clearly this spiritual tradition, as it were, which is passed on from one context to another, as opposed to a religious influence, which is different. But we will have questions and answers at the end of this session, and so save your questions for the end of this session. And in the meantime, I'm going to invite the other speaker in this session, Professor Pouyan Rezvani, whom I'm very happy to invite because I've worked with him, and we have in particular worked on the project Ptolemaios Arabus et Latinus, which I should point out is very relevant to our discussions over the next 1.5 days, because this is looking specifically at the Arabic and then the Latin transmission of the works of the greatest astrologer of the Middle Ages, Ptolemy of Alexandria, who lived in the 2nd century AD, and just showing how this astronomy was integrated or assimilated into Arabic culture, and then how it was passed on from the Arabic rather than from the Greek to the West. Pouyan has produced now the definitive edition of the Arabic, of one of the Arabic versions of the Almagest, which is really a superb work of task that he's fulfilled. And so I invite Pouyan to come and talk on the comparative survey of medieval Arabic translations of Ptolemy's Almagest.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you. To give this talk today in this wonderful conference, and thank you for the introduction. So, as Professor Burnett already mentioned, and you can also see in the title, I would like to talk about a comparative survey of the medieval Arabic translations of Ptolemy's Almagest. Claudius Ptolemaeus was the most prominent astronomer and astrologer in the 2nd century, and he was working in Alexandria, the principal city of Greco-Roman Egypt, and he wrote his most influential work on astronomy entitled the Almagest, not earlier than 150. The Almagest comprises 13 books, and it is an exposition of geocentric planetary theory, describing the motions of the planets by means of geometrical models. And the original Greek text of the Almagest was edited by Heiberg in 1898 and was published. So we have the critical edition of the original Greek text, and then it was translated from Greek into English, published in 1984 by Gerard Toomer. So so far we have the original Greek text and also the English translation of the Greek. As we know, during the 8th to the 10th century AD, almost all of the non-literary and non-historical Greek books, which were not religious and not related to the religion, actually were available through the Eastern Byzantine Empire and the Near East, were translated from Greek into Arabic and also into Syriac on different topics, including astrology, alchemy, mathematics, astronomy, theory of music, and etc. And these translations were carried out in the frame of so-called translation movement. I say so-called because this term of translation movement was used by some scholars and then was criticized by some other scholars. So, according to the historical sources, as far as I could find in the medieval Islamic historical sources, if we trust the historians who were not expert in astronomy, and hopefully they did not actually confuse the Almagest with other works of Ptolemy, which were on astronomy, the Almagest was translated directly from Greek into Arabic 7 times, apparently. The first one is an anonymous translation for Al-Mansur, the second caliph of the Abbasid dynasty, who was the founder of Baghdad. And then a group of translators translated it again for the minister of Harun, the 5th caliph of the Abbasid dynasty, and then Abu Hassan and Salm, translated it again for the same person, the same minister, and then Al-Hasan ibn Quraysh translated the Almagest again from Greek into Arabic, but all these translations are unfortunately lost. And then we have 3 extant translations. The earliest one is by Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf ibn Matar and Sarjun ibn Hilya al-Rumi for Al-Ma'mun, who was the 7th caliph of the Abbasid dynasty. And we have 1 complete and 1 incomplete manuscript of this translation. And then around 50 years later, Ishaq ibn Hunayn, the son of Hunayn ibn Ishaq, who was a very famous figure in the translation movement, and he established the standards of translation, carried out a translation of the Almagest in Arabic, which was later revised by Thabit ibn Qurra, the prominent mathematician and polymath, who was also a great translator. And so I will refer to this translation as Ishaq Thabit translation from now on. Fortunately, we have around 10 complete and incomplete manuscripts of this translation, and actually it became the most widespread Arabic translation of the Almagest. And then the last one is Thabit's own version of the Almagest, which is different from his revision of Ishaq's translation of the Almagest. I call it version because it is not a literal translation of the Almagest, but he paraphrased and in some cases summarized or a little bit adjusted the text. And we have 2 incomplete manuscripts of this version. Now I would like to draw your attention to the manuscripts of these 3 extant translations of the Almagest. So as I mentioned, the earliest one is by Al-Hajjaj, together with Sarjun. A complete manuscript of this translation is preserved in Leiden, and it is dated back to the 12th or the 13th century AD. And you can see just one of the pages of this this manuscript on the right side of the slide, which is actually in Maghrebi script. And then we have another manuscript which is incomplete, containing only the first half of the Almagest, I mean from the beginning to the end of book 6, which is preserved in London, British Library. And apparently it was copied in the 13th century. And here is an overview of the 10 manuscripts of the Ishaq Thabit translation. There are only 2 complete manuscripts of this translation. As you see, one of them is the first one is this table, which was copied in Tunis in the 11th century. And then we have another one which is in this list number 7, Judeo-Arabic manuscript. So the language is Arabic, but in Hebrew characters. It is preserved in Paris. This also contains the complete text of the Almagest, but only the star catalog, the table for the stars, is taken from Al-Hajjaj's translation. So actually the only complete manuscript which covers the entire text and the star catalog of the Ishaq Thabit translation is the Tunis manuscript, which is also the earliest one. Then the rest are incomplete manuscripts. So here I would like to just a little bit talk about the introductory remark of the Ishaq Thabit translation, which is included in 2 of the manuscripts, the Tunis manuscript and also one of the Paris manuscripts of this translation. I think it is a very interesting remark because it lists the items of the revisions of Thabit which were applied to the Ishaq translation. So as you see, the translation of the Arabic remark would be the units or the chapters of the first part or Maghala of the book by Ptolemy of Qaluth concerning the mathematical sciences, or Ta'alim. That's a great book, well known as the Almagest, translated from Greek into Arabic for Abu Saqr, Ismail ibn Bulbul, who was the minister of Mu'tamid, by Ishaq ibn Hunayn ibn Ishaq, the physical practitioner, al-Mutatabib, and revised by Thabit ibn Qurra al-Harrani. Any comment, abridgment, elucidation, clarification, facilitation, assimilation, rectification, annotation, revision, and correction between the lines of this book and on the subject of it, and embedded in it and its margins, is by Thabit ibn Qurra al-Harrani. I think this is a very important remark because it clearly tells us what Thabit actually did with Ishaq's translation in order to provide a revision of this translation. Then we have some traces of Thabit's own version, as I already mentioned in the comparative table in the overview, which is different from his revision of the Ishaq translation. So, in the left side of this slide, you can see a quote from Al-Ghifti's Tarikh al-Hukama, which was written in the 13th century AD, in which he mentions Thabit's version of the Almagest, and he says that after he revised the translation by Ishaq, he provided a translation of this book, meaning the Almagest, properly, and he also revised it or corrected it, and he clarified it, and we have a manuscript of this version in his hand, so an autograph actually. Then on the right hand of the right side of the slide, you can see the marginal note, which is found in several manuscripts of At-Tusi's recension of the Almagest. For instance, in a manuscript which is preserved in Iran in the Malik Library, which mentions the three well-known translations of the Almagest. The translation by Al-Hajjaj, and then by Ishaq, which is revised by Thabit, and then the third one attributed to Thabit himself. And it also mentions that Thabit's version is a little bit different from the other two translations regarding the numbers of chapters. So, actually, Thabit's version of the Almagest is a partially literal translation, but not completely literal translation of the Almagest, with some additional explanatory sentences in order to clarify the passages in some cases, maybe for some didactic reasons, and also references to proportions from Euclid's Elements, but these references are actually different in various manuscripts of this version. So I'm not sure to what extent they belong to the original text of Thabit. Maybe in some cases they have been added by scribes or by the owners of the manuscripts. And it also paraphrased the original text of the Almagest and rearrangements. It also includes the rearrangement of the chapters of the Almagest. So Thabit's version was first identified by Dirk Gruppe in its Latin translation in a manuscript in Dresden, and then he found a manuscript of the Arabic text of Thabit's version, which is preserved in Jaipur, and then my colleagues at the PAL project in Munich found another manuscript which covers actually further parts of this version and is preserved in Patna. So here you can see a list of the identified copies of the Thabit's version of the Almagest. As I said, one of them is Jaipur manuscript, which is undated but probably was copied in the 16th century. and it covers from the beginning of the text to the end of chapter 2 of book 6. And then the second one is the Patna manuscript, which was copied in the 13th century and is actually copied from a manuscript which was in the hand of Al-Biruni, the very famous polymath in the 10th century Iran. And it covers from the beginning of the text to the end of book 8, so it also includes the star catalogue. But interestingly enough, the star catalogue of this version is also taken from Al-Hajjaj's translation. It does not belong to Thabit himself. And there are two anonymous abridgments of this version, which are extant in two manuscripts, so each one of which is extant in one manuscript. One of them is in Tehran, and the other is in formerly Nasiri library in Tehran. And again, this might be interesting to mention that these abridgments do not include any reference to Euclid's Elements. So again, I really don't know to what extent these additional references are original. And here we can also see an overview of a comparison between the Patna and Jaipur manuscript. So, for instance, in Jaipur manuscript we have book 3 of the Almagest, but Patna is missing this book, but then it contains some other parts that are lost in the Jaipur manuscript. And I have also realized that there are more references to Euclid's Elements in Jaipur than in Patna. And in some cases we have different diagrams in these two different manuscripts. Now I would like to talk a little bit about the factors that influence the language of translation, specifically in the translation of the Almagest, concerning these 3 translations that are extant. As far as I could find out, we can classify these factors in these 2 general groups, so the codicological, paleographic, and linguistic factors, and then some other factors. Regarding the codicological, paleographic, and linguistic factors that are influencing the language of the translation, we can actually put them in 2 groups. The factors which are related to the source of translation, for instance, the quality of manuscripts of the original text, peculiarities of the Greek written characters, for instance, the numbers, and character of the text, ranging from dry and scientific to elaborate and highly literary, and then the factors which are related to the translator, for instance, the mother tongue of the translator, the linguistic competence of the translator, and writing style and possible affiliations. The other factors which influence the language of translation could be, for instance, translator's intellectual background, whether he was familiar with the topic, for instance, astronomy or mathematics, and the requirements of the patrons, for instance, the caliphs or the ministers, who are the patrons of these translations, and then the target readers of the text. Regarding the quality of the manuscripts of the Almagest that were used by the translators, unfortunately we have no information. And then considering the peculiarities of the Greek written characters, as I mentioned, they are mainly related to the numerical values. For instance, the Greek letters that were used in the alphanumerical system in order to be used in tables, for instance, in astronomical tables. And in some cases, the similarities between some Greek characters might confuse the reader or the translators. For instance, alpha and delta could look very similar to each other, so the translator might confuse them. And regarding the character of the text, specifically about the Almagest, according to the specialists of Greek, Ptolemy's style in the Almagest has rhetoric aspects, although the text is scientific as a whole. but in many cases the paragraphs or passages are really long, and it's really difficult to render a translation in another language, for instance, in this case in Arabic. Regarding the factors that are related to the translator, as I mentioned, for instance, the mother tongue is one of the aspects or the factors. We don't have any information about the mother tongue of Al-Hajjaj and Sarjun, but apparently Ishaq's mother tongue was Syriac, and he was very well versed in Arabic and Greek and even Persian. And Thabit also had Syriac as mother tongue, and he had a high level of knowledge in Arabic and Greek. Regarding the linguistic competence, according to Ibn Nadim, who was living in the 10th century, and he provided the famous book Al-Fihrist, Ishaq's Arabic style was superior to the style of his father, and he even indulged in written poetry in Arabic. And about Thabit, as we know, Muhammad ibn Musa, who was the eldest of the Banu Musa, the sons of Musa ibn Shakir, was impressed by Thabit's language skills in Harran. That's why he invited Thabit to come to Baghdad and to join them for some translation activities. Then we have the factor of writing style and possible affiliation of the translators. We know that Ishaq was a member of the circle of translators supervised by his father, as I said before. His father was Hunayn ibn Ishaq, who was one of the leading figures in the translation movement. But apparently Thabit was not belonging to any of these groups of translators. And then we have other factors, for instance, translators' intellectual background. As far as we know, Al-Hajjaj is one of the earliest translators of Euclid's Elements. So he translated Euclid's Elements even 2 times, once for Harun and then once for Ma'mun. And actually in one of the manuscripts of the Almagest, if I'm not mistaken, in the Leiden manuscript, I've seen the term or title Al-Hasib for Hajjaj. And apparently Al-Hasib in that time was used for the people who were into mathematics, so they were actually familiar or even expert in mathematics. So I think he had a high level of knowledge in mathematics already, so he was completely familiar with the topic of the Almagest. Then we have Ishaq, who followed the medical profession of his father, but as a translator was much concerned with philosophy. And then Thabit, as I said, he was a polymath and a very good astronomer and mathematician. That's why I think his revision of the Ishaq translation is very important for us, because in some cases he even changed or improved the terms that were already used by Ishaq regarding the concepts of astronomical terms that he found in the Greek text. Then the other factor is the requirements of the patrons. For instance, the Caliph Ma'mun, we know that he had some interests in philosophy and astronomy, and he supported astronomers also to continue their activities in his court. And in the case of Ismail ibn Bulbul, the minister or the vizier of the Caliph Mu'tamid, who was the patron of the Ishaq Thabit translation of the Almagest, he was supporting in general cultural activities, including works on literature and exact sciences. For instance, the translation of Qustab bin Lugha of one of the books by Ptolemy, which is about Dhat al-Kursi, is also dedicated to this Ismail ibn Bulbul. But I couldn't find any information about his knowledge in mathematics and astronomy. It was interesting for me to just consider this factor, because I was wondering whether the translators actually adjusted the text that in their translations such that the patrons could also understand the text or not, even if the patrons were not expert in that topic. Because I found in a text, in a treatise by Hunayd ibn Ishaq, the father of this Ishaq, who is very proud of himself for adjusting the medical texts by Galen in his translators, such that even the non-expert readers can also understand the text. But this is not the case in the translations of the Almagest. So they did not change or modify the text at all. These three the translators that I've mentioned, even if the patrons were not experts in this field. And then we have the factor of the target readers of the text. And Ptolemy's Almagest is a highly technical text in astronomy, and the reader must have some at least intermediate knowledge in mathematics and astronomy. So it is not for the beginners. And it could also, as I said, influence the translation if the translator want to translate it in a way that even non-experts or the beginners can also understand the text. But this did not happen actually in the translations of the Almagest. So just a very small comparative survey of the two translations between the two translations of the Al-Hajjaj and Ishaq Thabit. I would say that they have used different terminology and formulation of sentences, and even in some cases the orientations of the diagrams are also different in different manuscripts, although all of them are correct mathematically, but they just changed the orientation of the diagrams. I don't know why. And there are also some occasional differences between the numbers in tables, which are apparently not because of the, for instance, re-observations. So I'm not sure whether they re-observed the stars to provide the tables with the astronomical parameters in the translations. But these differences might be due to some other reasons. And on the other hand, they used the same methods and steps and numerical values of geometric proofs of the Almagest, so they did not change the geometric proofs of the Almagest in the translations, just translated whatever was in the original text. So here you can see just an example of the different orientation of the diagrams. As I said, mathematically, all of them are correct. So in the left hand, in the left side of the slide, you can see a diagram in the Leiden manuscript of Al-Hajjaj's translation, and in the right side you can see the diagram for the same proposition in the Tunis manuscript of the Ishaq Thabit manuscript. And then in the middle you can see the diagram of the same proposition in the Greek text of the Almagest in one of the earliest extant manuscripts of the Greek text of the Almagest. So as you can see, actually the earliest manuscript of the Greek text of the Almagest that is extant is from the 9th century. So exactly from the time that the translations actually were made. And as you see, that the orientations are different, but as I said again, they are mathematically completely correct. And as I mentioned before regarding the Thabit version, there are some small shifts in chapter numbers. In some cases, Thabit actually skipped some chapters in his version. And I have also found some differences in terminology used by Ishaq, Thabit, and Al-Hajjaj. In some cases, Thabit used the same terms as Al-Hajjaj. In some cases, the terms in the Ishaq Thabit version and in Thabit's version are the same. For instance, the second row, اختلاف القمر البسيط, instead of اختلاف القمر المفرد, which is used by Al-Hajjaj around 50 years earlier. And then in some cases, the terms are different between Thabit's version and Al-Hajjaj's translation, but they are the same in Ishaq Thabit version and Al-Hajjaj's translation. So one of the questions that I was hoping to be able to answer was whether Thabit provided his version before his revision of the Ishaq translation or after that, but I think it needs further investigations, and it's not really easy to answer this question. But as I said before, the only actually one of the two identified manuscripts of the Thabit version includes the Star Catalogue, and the Star Catalogue in that only manuscript belongs to Al-Hajjaj's translation. So my hypothesis at the moment for the timing is apparently Al-Hajjaj first provided a translation, and maybe then Thabit provided his version, probably for some didactic reasons, and then Ishaq made a translation, and then Thabit revised Ishaq's translation, and actually it became, as I said, the most widespread Arabic translation of the Almagest, and was the base of many commentaries and super commentaries that were made in later centuries by Islamic scholars. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pouyan. So the floor is open for people to ask questions either from Professor Nadawi or from Professor Rezvani, Dr. Rezvani. Right at the very back.
I can do either. My name is Harun Küçük. I have questions for both of our speakers today. For Professor Nadawi, I guess when I listened to you and I thought about your position in Indian society, right? You are a Muslim professor in a Muslim university in India. And what you're telling us in your talk is how well integrated the spiritual traditions of India and the Muslim world are. And you could even say that India is an integral part of the Muslim world. How do you see this playing out or not playing out in Indian society today? What's the sort of nature and extent of spirituality or spiritualism that you see around you? And I think that would be my question to you. And for you, I was surprised actually when I looked at the list of copies you provided. Almost none of it is in the Middle East, so not much Ptolemeus Arabus Apud Arabes, if I may. And I guess I wonder, if there is an explanation for that, or do you have some sense of the movement? I mean, I figure, Leiden, Paris, Cambridge, these copies are probably acquired in the early modern periods, 17th century, 18th century, something to that effect. But then, I know that, our copy in Philadelphia, it's a 20th century acquisition. So it would be helpful to understand the movement of these early manuscripts. Thank you to both authors. Wonderful, wonderful presentations. Thank you.
I appreciate this question, and this aspect actually intrigues any person for any of his deliberations while dealing with this interactive domain in the realm of philosophy and spirituality when related to ancient India, Sanskrit India, and the present perspectives. In the present perspectives, we would be finding that in ultimate analysis, because of so many historical and social factors, the spiritualistic aspects of Indian wisdom I'll be calling it Vedic wisdom or the Upanishadic wisdom. They have been equated with the later interpretations, which equated the Vedic and Upanishadic wisdom with Hinduism. And in some aspects, they are to be seen in some specific political perspectives. So, if we disassociate ourselves with these later developments, because texts are well preserved, the Upanishadic texts are well preserved in Sanskrit as well as in other languages, and the interactive domain between this and the Abrahamic domain in Arabic as well as in Persian, this is also well reserved, well preserved, well disseminated. Like Al-Insan al-Kamil by Al-Jili, Abdul Karim Al-Jili will be having the very system of Lataif. And Lataif cannot be understood in isolation of the chakra system as we find in the yogic philosophies. Even the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, which has been translated. So these aspects of spirituality which are to be seen, as I have shared with the learned academia, which are to be seen in the spiritualistic interpretation of the self and how to train it in order to converse with the ultimate reality. They have been in a specific stage of history. They have been disseminated by the Occidental, Eastern, Indian, Sanskrit sources, and the evidences are there. Now, what about the present scenario? This is because of the later institutional efforts to project things, even in the domain of spirituality and philosophy, on some specific canonical perspectives, equating like yoga with Hinduism proper, or equating Upanishads with or Upanishadic wisdom with Hinduism proper. So that's what the reason. Otherwise, if it is Aham Brahmasmi, it is Anal Haq, and it's simply the literal translation. Significantly, before the translation of these Indian texts, we do not, to my limited study, I could not find any saying of aphorism nature representing the essence of Aham Brahmasmi, or I am the ultimate, or Aham Aust. So this is to be seen in philosophical perspective alongside the practical versions which are found in different silsilas, in different Sufi orders, like the Naqshbandi silsila. The Lataif system is over there. In Arabic perspectives too, I am not limiting myself to the perspectives put forward by Sheikh Muhammad Ghaus Gawaliri. So apart from, although Gawalir has written in both, in Persian as well as in Arabic, so the Lataif system as well as the philosophical aphorisms will be finding with the Al-Hallaj, they cannot be context except in line with this historical dialogue that has taken place, and which should be seen as a shared legacy of humankind, especially when these two great civilizations have stood not in the confrontational mode as we find, unfortunately, in modern times. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for your question. I think it concerns two factors or two parts. The first part is regarding the reception of the translation, whether it was in the western part of the Islamic civilization or in the eastern part. And we can find some witnesses based on, for instance, the hand of the copyist or the place that it was copied. As you probably noticed, most of the manuscripts are in Maghribi hand, especially in the case of the Ishaq Thabit translation, and also in the two manuscripts that we have of Hajjaj's translation. Almost all of them are in Maghribi hand, except for one of the manuscripts, which is preserved in Paris. But the two incomplete manuscripts that we have of the Thabit version are both in Naskh, which was most actually mostly used in the eastern part of the Islamic civilization, for instance, in Iran. And both of them are preserved in India now, in Jaipur and in Patna. And there is an article by their group about the reception of Thabit's version of the Almagest in the eastern part of the Islamic civilization. For instance, Ibn Sina apparently also used this version in his Ashifa. And then the second part of your question would be regarding the owners of the manuscripts, that we might get some information about it from the owner's statements and the ownership statements, and also the seals, the owner's seals. This is actually the task that we have also in our project, to provide a catalog, an extensive catalog of the manuscripts of Ptolemaic manuscripts that we have collected, including, of course, the manuscripts of the Arabic translations of the Almagest. So I think, hopefully, if it will be published in the next year or in 27, then I think you will have extensive descriptions of these manuscripts, including some explanations about the ownership statements and seals that give you a general image of this kind of voyage of the manuscript, that it was first owned by this person and then it went through these countries. So I think that would be the most informative, actually, piece that might help to answer your question.
Thank you for the great papers. I have a question about the use of the term East and West in your sources. As Mr. Sharaf Yamani said, we just use these concepts as an intellectual exercise. It's part of a shared humanity, and it seems like in Pouyan's paper that they all might think themselves as West. But I wonder in your case, Mr. Nadawi, is Bruni ever say, we are the Western science, thinking about Arabs and the Greeks together as the West, and use the East for India or not? Just curiosity. And second curiosity, I read that Nasser and Nehru built these mutual centers, one Arab Studies Center in India and an Indian Studies Center in Cairo. Are you the holder of that chair? I'm now reading your biography that this Arab Studies chair, is that anything to do with Jamal Abdel Nasser and Nehru? Thank you. That's my curiosity.
Thank you very much. Related to the second point, that is a curiosity, I'm not associated with that chair.
Okay.
So this is it. And as regards the concept of East or West dialogue, as in regard to Al-Biruni, so he didn't use these terms, or that is depicting or describing the Indian wisdom as the Eastern wisdom. Rather, you have used the word Al-Hind. Al-Hind. So, and Al-Hind, although he also uses some specific terms which are purely Sanskrit, like Sankhya for Sankhya Darshan, or the Sankhya philosophy, he uses the word Sankhya. And altogether doesn't ignore the word actually, that is the yoga. Then why I have preferred the use of this word? I have used this word in context of the triangle that we find in relation to the spiritualistic vision of interpreting the self, as we have in Indian philosophy, chiefly in yoga and yoga darshan. And of course Upanishadic. Well, the yoga darshan or the yoga, sometimes it is a very simplistic word, which I think should not be used in academic deliberations because of the specific preferences it has got in modern times, because it has been equated with Hatha yoga. Although yoga is a philosophy, primarily it's the darshan or the philosophy that addresses greater questions of greater ontological questions, the questions of essence and existence, the ultimate reality. So the holistic perspective. So this interpretation of the soul, in accordance to the Eastern or Oriental perspectives, Oriental vision, as we find in Upanishadic. And again, the word Upanishadic that is very much close to the Sufi interpretation of the things. Because in my study, as I'm a student of Indian literature and philosophy, I didn't find any big difference between the Sufi projection, Sufi analysis of the soul, of the things spiritual, and the Upanishadic ones. Sometimes it comes to us if we disassociate ourselves from some wrongly projected, politically motivated eventualities, driven by eventualities, which are, of course, plenty of uses, unfortunately, in modern times. So if we confront the reality, we'll be finding them in the text which are found, which are not doubtful. The thing is that they are not doubtful. They speak for themselves. So we can simply find the things that it is the Upanishadic darshan. And if this Upanishadic darshan was translated, or philosophy was translated, and the texts are before us into Arabic as well as in Persian and other languages, then this is evidence of history, and we should not stand staged to this thing. So this was a triangle, that is the Eastern Indian triangle, and how it was disseminated into Arabic, and how it is reflected in the Occidental perspective, that is the Bahram and Josephat. So in this triangle, I have used the word East and West, encounter or say dialogue, conversation. Thank you very much.
Yes, Professor Sen. Yeah.
Well, thank you both for your wonderful, wonderful presentations. I have a question for Professor Rezvani. To the best of my knowledge, Sabit and Hunayn were also involved in the Arabic translation of Ptolemy's other major astrological work, Tetrabiblos. I wonder whether in the copies, extant copies of the Almagest, you also came across Tetrabiblos in its translations inserted into the volume.
Thanks. No, as I said, actually they just followed the original text of the Almagest. So in the translations, there is no reference to Tetrabiblos as far as I remember. So maybe we should have a look to the other manuscripts of the other works, because we also have the extant manuscripts of the Tetrabiblos itself. And, but in the Almagest, I do not remember any cross reference, for instance, added by the translators.
Yeah, please, yes.
Thank you so much. I have a question from Dr. Rezvani. Almagest is the most important book in astronomy. It's the Bible of mathematical astronomy, like Newton's Principia. Why we have that what called little number of manuscripts remained from Almagest, but we have plenty of other books in astronomy? Was it so difficult to teach, or they didn't teach it in madrasas, or they dissected it into Almagest-based books, like books on instrumentation, books on zijas, books about, mathematical calculations? Why we don't have that many extant books, extant copies of Almagest, while we have, 300 hay'a of Kushji, or Tazkira.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think maybe the main reason is that, as I mentioned, and you also know, the Almagest is a highly technical text, which was not easily actually understood by for instance, the students of astronomy in the time, especially for the beginners. And if I compare the little number of the manuscripts of the Almagest itself with more than 170 manuscripts of Atusi's recension of the Almagest, I would say that Atusi's recension of the Almagest, which is kind of commentary, especially mathematical, not astronomical commentary. The Almagest took the place of the Almagest in the 13th century, and then it became the base of many super commentaries, for instance by Nizamuddin Nishaburi and Samarkandi and others. And then we have also the commentary by Jabir ibn Aflah, which is a more astronomical commentary than the mathematical commentary on the Almagest. So my answer would be that because the Almagest itself was not very easy actually to be taught and to be learned by the students of astronomy, then the commentaries, especially the recension by Tusi, took the place of the Almagest itself. Maybe.
Yes, Sali.
Thank you so much to both Professors Nadawi and Professor Rezvani. Just a quick question, Professor Nadawi, just out of curiosity. We know roughly that the surviving texts of old Greek texts range around 50,000 roughly, and then the Latin around 500,000, and the Arabic, Islamic probably in millions. You mentioned that there are around 70 texts, if I got it right, Sanskrit texts that are mentioned in mainly Latin and Arabic Islamic sources. Do you have any idea what is the surviving numbers of the Sanskrit old manuscripts up to today? Just a rough number would be interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was among one of the things I had envisioned to speak about, but due course of time it just simply slipped out of the discourse. Thank you very much. So how many texts, the Sanskrit texts are remaining, are available out of the 70 or 75 which have been translated into Arabic in the Middle Ages by the known translators, sometimes by the unknown translators. In my study I have found that the Siddhanta books like Suri Siddhanta of and other astronomical and scientific texts, mathematical texts, they are present in modern versions. In Sanskrit versions they are present. The Sanskrit origins are not lost. They are present in Sanskrit. They have been translated in different editions. They are been translated into different languages, including English. So this is it. Like Suri Siddhanta is there. Even alongside these well-known texts which have survived, which are present to us, alongside some of the texts which we find mention of their names in Arabic sources. Like the book written by Viraha Mahira. Viraha Mahira, his book, which has been mentioned by the historians, but its translated text is not traceable. It's only mentioned, the titles are mentioned in books, but the actual text, which is in Sanskrit, it is present. It is available in Sanskrit as well as in other translations. So a significant number of them are present in the Sanskrit text, but as regards the translations, so only you'll be finding that the astronomical tables which were translated from the Indian sources, either by the Indian translators or the Indian translators, Indian scholars like Mankah al-Hindi, Shanat al-Hindi, etc., Salih ibn Bahla al-Hindi, they assisted the Baghdadi scholars in order to translate them into Arabic. That was sort of assistance. So some of these texts are not found, but of course we'll be finding the abridgment or reproduction of these texts in like Al-Khwarizmi and others. We'll be finding that. But the Siddhanta sources texts are primarily present in original Sanskrit form, alongside, like of course, the Panchatantra, which is present, which was primarily written, chiefly written by Vishnu Sharma. It is preserved. It is available in Sanskrit. Kitab al-Buddh. Kitab al-Buddh, in some of the history books, we'll find the mention of Kitab al-Buddh, which was translated by a number of scholars. So Kitab al-Buddha, the book of Buddha, so was it the Buddha Charitra? But since this text in Arabic translation is not available, so we cannot say by surety, we cannot ascertain that Kitab al-Buddha was actually the Buddha Charitra or the Qissat al-Buluhar wa Buzars. So this is one thing. But again, let me relate it with something that has been a subject of some questions earlier. This aspect of the fusion between ancient Indian wisdom, I don't see it as a dialogue between Hinduism proper versus Islam proper, rather focusing on the spiritualistic system that serves the shared grounds of communion between humanity, East or West. And this aspect has been augmented on records, and kindly allow me to use this word, it has been augmented on records in practice, and will preserved in records by the significant number of the Sufi silsila, Sufi orders, in their practices, in their vision. So the pantheistic vision we cannot ignore in this context, in this perspective, the historical context of this dialogue between the Sanskrit sources and the Arab sources. Thank you very much.
Oh yes, righto, please, yes. Yes, please, yes.
Thank you very
My
much.
friend, yes.
Is that on? Lovely, thank you very much. I apologize for my late arrival due to adverse weather conditions. We've never had snow in November in London. I come to this from an architectural and urban design point of view, and I'm only talking about the terminology in both addresses, and that is medieval Baghdad. This is the wrong terminology with due respect. It should be Baghdad during the golden age of Islamic civilization, in brackets, during European medieval times. And I've been trying to actually correct this for many years, and it seems to me that it is impossible. I object to that in exactly the same way. I object to Middle East. You know, are we middle to whom, east to whom, rather than being Arab or Western Asian and North African or Muslims, and other things like the Arab Spring. Terrible. It was Arab Jahannam, really, rather than anything else. So I would beg you to try to really do this in the future. I've been fighting this for over 10 years and I haven't succeeded yet. Especially in this highly intellectual gathering brains, about this subject. That is where it should be corrected. I am very grateful. Thank you very much.
Yes, I don't think that needs an answer. Thank you very much. And Professor Mansouri, the last question. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor, for these pertinent papers. I like them very much. I want to start with the ending question of Professor Nadawi concerning the fusion of Abrahamic Semitic religions and Brahmic Indian traditions. Let me say traditions. If I'm correct, the most influential trends in is concerned in mathematics and mysticism. And can we speak about the fusion of both the trends in what we call in Arabic Islamic traditions the Hisab al-Jumal, as a cosmological, numerological system of trying to solve the ambiguities of the self, the individual, and the universe. So that was my question. My question is for Professor Ridai. Is do you came across any critical examination of Batlimos Majesty regarding his geocentric vision? I'm speaking about Ibn Hazm and his critical of the flat Earth since the 10th century. Have you came across any examination or any notes and comments regarding these points of view that explicitly challenges the views of Batlimus and His Majesty, please, if I put it right. Thank you.
Thank you very much for both for the first observation and advice, of course, and the second question. Let me start with the first question. Second question regarding this aspect of the Arab Indian numerals, which is in history it is the Hindu numerals, because here the word Hindu was to be equated with Indian. So this mathematical aspect has been outside of my study, except in some overall perspectives. So although I'll be finding one aspect of this in relation to that is philosophy or the darshan, where the concept of one has been incorporated within the medieval Islamic spiritualistic perspectives of the oneness or tawheed, that is again in some pantheistic perspectives, where this multiplicity of the existences are simply pushed into oblivion within the concept of the one or the oneness in terms of numbers. So this is it related to the Al-Adad al-Hindi. Regarding the advice of the learned professor, I respect your advice, but let me explain my point of view regarding how to address the questions of interactions between sometimes two cultures or different cultures standing in terms of separation, or where the epistemology has been more aligned to the question of or the aspect of otherness. So here, in order to avoid some subjective say expressions or subjective perspectives while addressing aspects of history, I have very consciously avoided the term of like Baghdad or the golden days of Baghdad, or the Baghdad as the paragon of Eastern Arabic and Persian culture that is common, because Baghdad happened to be very much the cosmopolitan center of the world at the time. So this is right in some perspectives, but as a humble student of historians, I think that when we address some specific aspects of history in cross-cultural, cross-linguistic perspectives, then any aspect of or any connotations of I won't be saying subjectivity, rather projections based on such things that would be smacking of or standing for such things, I think they might be relevant in some perspectives, in some specific historical and communal or geographical perspectives. But when we're addressing questions like the dialogue between cultures, dialogue between civilizations, so here I think we have to be, in my opinion, very much particular about avoiding the subjective judgments or subjective terminology. Although we'll be facing the applicability of specific terminologies like medieval. What do you mean by medieval? Because the concept of medieval would be different from east to west. So these are, of course, very right projections and observations. But in place of this, if you want to replace these projections, these terminologies, with something that will be like based on some specific historical sectorial perspectives, I think they won't be helping us while addressing the genuine concerns of the historical dialogue that is taking place. So in this sequence, I have preferred this word. So that's it. Thank you very much. With due respect to all.
Quick answer from.
Thank you for your question. As far as I have seen the manuscripts of the commentaries of the Almagest in the Islamic scientific tradition, I couldn't find any criticism against the geocentric system, but the criticisms against the Almagest are mainly regarding the, for instance, فَلَكُ مُعَدِّلُ الْمَصِيرِ, the quant, or especially from the philosophical point of view, or the order of the planets, for instance, the Venus and the Mercury. But as your question is specifically about the geocentric system, I think, if I understood correctly, the only case that comes to my mind and contradicts the geocentric system is a very specific type of the astrolabe, which was made apparently by Sejzi in the 10th century, which is actually based on the movement of the horizon, I mean the Earth. And it is called the bolt-shaped astrolabe. But Al-Biruni mentions this astrolabe in two works. One of them is Isti'ab al-Wujuh al-Mumkana, and the other one is At-Tatriq, which is a highly technical text on the astrolabes, especially non-standard and mixed types of astrolabes. And there he says that he visited Sejzi and he saw this astrolabe apparently made or maybe invented by Sejzi. And then Al-Biruni says that even Sejzi didn't understand the point, and he maybe only made this kind of astrolabe because it would be easier for the astrolabe makers who are not willing to make the reed or the spider of the astrolabe, because in this case you have only one kind of piece which represents the horizon, and then you can move it, and it is much easier than making the reed of the astrolabe with so many metal work in these things. This is the only case that comes to my mind against geocentric, but it's not actually scientific in that aspect. So thank you.
Well, I'm afraid we'll have to bring the discussion to an end here. You can continue to talk to our honoured speakers during the coffee break, which will now take place. So let's give a round of applause again to our first two speakers.